Good morning, my loves. We're back with Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Sort of left on the cliffhanger yesterday. We were trying to figure out what they're going to do with that hourglass. Seems like they were going back in time. So, let's see. We're on the top of 420. Are you telling me, Harry whispered, that we're here in this cupboard and we're out there too? Yes, said Hermione, her ears still glued to the cupboard door. I'm sure it's us. It doesn't sound like more than 3 people, and we're walking slowly because we're under the invisibility cloak. She broke off, still listening intently. We've gone down the front steps. Hermione sat down on an upturned bucket, looking desperately anxious. Harry wanted a few questions answered. Where did you get that hourglass thing? It's called a time turner, said Hermione, and I got it from Professor McGonagall on her first day back. I've been using it all year to get to all of my lessons. Professor McGonagall made me swear I wouldn't tell anyone. She had to write to all sorts of letters to the Ministry of Magic so I could have one. She had to tell them that I was a model student and that I'd never ever use it for anything except my studies. I've been turning it back so I could do hours over again. That's how I've been doing several lessons at once, see? But, Harry, I don't understand what Dumbledore wants us to do. Why did he tell us to go back 3 hours? How's that going to help Sirius? Harry stared at her shadowy face. There must be something that happened around now, and he wants us to change, he said slowly. What happened? We were walking down Hagrid's 3 hours ago. This is 3 hours ago, and we were walking down to Hagrid, said Hermione. We just heard ourselves leaving. Harry frowned. He felt as though he was screwing up his whole brain in concentration. Dumbledore just said, we could save more than one innocent life. Then it hit him. Hermione, we're going to save Buckbeak. But how will that help Sirius? Dumbledore said, he just told us where the window is, the window of Flintwood's office, where they've got Sirius locked up. We've got to fly Buckbeak up to the window and rescue Sirius. Sirius can escape on Buckbeak. They can escape together. From what Harry could see of Hermione's face, she looked terrified. If we manage that without being seen, it'll be a miracle. Well, we've got to try, haven't we, said Harry. He stood up and pressed his ear against the door. Doesn't sound like anyone's there. Come on, let's go. Harry pushed the cupboard door open. The entrance hall was deserted. As quickly and as quietly as they could, they darted out of the cupboard and down the stone steps. The shadows were already lengthening. The tops of the trees in the Forbidden Forest glided once more with gold. If anyone's looking out the window, Hermione squeaked, looking up at the castle behind them. Run for it, said Harry determinedly, straight into the Forbidden Forest. All right, we'll have to hide behind a tree or something and keep a lookout. Okay, but we'll go round by the greenhouses, said Hermione breathlessly. We need to keep out of sight of Hagrid's front door or we'll see us. We must be nearly at Hagrid's by now. Still working out what she meant, Harry set off at a sprint, Hermione behind him. They tore across the vegetable gardens to the greenhouses, paused for a moment behind them, then set off again, fast as they could, skirting around the Whomping Willow, tearing forward towards the shelter of the forest. Safe in the shadows of the trees, Harry turned round. Seconds later, Hermione arrived beside him, panting. Right, she gasped. We need to sneak over to Hagrid, so keep out of sight, Harry. They made their way silently through the trees, keeping to the very edge of the forest. Then, as they glimpsed the front of Hagrid's house, they heard a knock upon his door. They moved quickly behind a wide oak tree trunk and peered out from either side. Hagrid had appeared in the doorway, shaking and white, looking around to see who had knocked. And Harry heard his own voice. It's us. We're wearing the invisibility cloak. Let us in and we can take it off. You shouldn't have come. Hagrid whispered. He stood back, then shut the door quickly. This is the weirdest thing we've ever done, Harry said fervently. Let's move along a bit, Hermione whispered. We need to go nearer to Buckbeak. They crept through the trees until they saw the nervous hippogriff tethered to the fence around Hagrid's pumpkin patch. Now, Harry whispered. No, said Hermione. If we steal him now, those committee people will think Hagrid set him free. We've got to wait until they've seen he's tied outside. That's going to give us about 60 seconds, said Harry. This was starting to seem impossible. At that moment, there was a crash of breaking china from inside Hagrid's cabin. That's Hagrid breaking the milk jug, Hermione whispered. I'm going to find Scrabbers in a moment. Sure enough, a few minutes later, they heard Hermione's shriek of surprise. Hermione said Harry suddenly, what if we just run in there and grab Pettigrew? No, said Hermione in a terrified whisper. Don't you understand? We're breaking one of the most important wizardry laws. Nobody's supposed to change time. Nobody. You've heard Dumbledore. If we're seen, we'd only be seen by ourselves and Hagrid. Harry, what do you think that you'd do if you saw yourself burst into Hagrid's house? Said Hermione. "I'd think I'd gone mad," said Harry, "or I'd think that there was some dark magic going on." "Exactly. You wouldn't understand. You might even attack yourself, don't you see? Professor McGonagall told me what awful things have happened when wizards have meddled with time. Loads of them ended up killing their past or future selves by mistake." "Okay," said Harry. "That was just an idea. I had just thought..." But Hermione nudged him and pointed towards the castle. Harry moved his head a few inches to get a clearer view of the distant front doors. Dumbledore, Fudge, and the old committee member and McNair, the executioner, were coming down the steps. We're about to come out," Hermione breathed. And sure enough, moments later, Hagrid's back door opened and Harry saw himself, Ron, and Hermione walking out of it with Hagrid. It was, without a doubt, the strangest sensation of his life, standing behind the tree and watching himself in the pumpkin patch. "It's okay, Beaky, it's okay," Hagrid said to Buckbeak. Then he turned to Ron and Hermione and Harry. "Go on, get going." "Hagrid, we can't. We can't tell him what really happened. They can't kill him." "Go, it's bad enough without you lot in trouble and all." Harry watched the Hermione in the pumpkin patch throw the invisibility cloak over herself and Ron. "Go quick, don't listen." There was a knock on Hagrid's front door. The execution party had arrived, and Hagrid turned around and headed into his cabin, leaving the front door ajar. Harry watched the grass and patches all around the cabin and heard 3 pairs of feet retreating. He, Ron, and Hermione had gone, but Harry and Hermione, hidden in the trees now, could hear what was happening inside the cabin. Through the back door. "Where is the beast?" came the cold voice of McNair. Outside," Hagrid croaked. Harry pulled his head out of sight as McNair's face appeared at Hagrid's window, staring out at Buckbeak. Then they heard Fudge. "We have to read you official notice of execution, Hagrid. I'll make it quick. And then you and McNair need to sign it. McNair, you're supposed to listen to... That's procedure." McNair's face vanished from the window. It was now or never. "Wait here," Harry whispered to Hermione. "I'll do it." As Fudge's voice started again, Harry darted out from behind his tree, vaulted the fence into the pumpkin patch, and approached Buckbeak. "It's the decision of the Committee for the Disposal of Dangerous Creatures that the Hippogriff Buckbeak, hereafter called the Condemned, shall be executed on the 6th of June at sundown." Careful not to blink, Harry stared up into Buckbeak's fierce orange eye once more and bowed. Buckbeak sank to his scaly knees and then stood up again. Harry began to fumble with the rope, tying back Buckbeak to the fence. "Sentenced to execution by beheading, to be carried out by the committee's appointed executioner, Walden McNair." "Come on, Buckbeak," Harry murmured. "Come on, we're going to help you. Quietly, quietly. As witness below. Hagrid, you sign here." Harry threw all of his weight on the rope, but Buckbeak had dug in his front feet. "Well, let's get this over with," said the reedy voice of the committee member from inside Hagrid's cabin. "Hagrid, perhaps it would be better if you stayed inside." "No, I want to be with him till... I don't want him to be alone." Footsteps echoed from within the cabin. "Buckbeak, move," Harry hissed. Harry tugged harder on the rope around Buckbeak's neck, and the hippogriff began to walk, rustling its wings irritably. Then, still 10 feet away from the forest, in plain view of Hagrid's door. "One moment, please, McNair," came Dumbledore's voice. "You need to sign too." The footsteps stopped, and Harry heaved on the rope. Buckbeak snapped his beak and walked a little faster. Hermione's white face was sticking out from behind a tree. "Harry, hurry," she mouthed. Harry could still hear Dumbledore's voice, talking from within the cabin. He gave the rope another wrench. Buckbeak broke into a grudging trot. They had reached the trees. "Quick, quick," Hermione moaned, darted out from behind the trees, seizing the rope too and adding her weight to make Buckbeak move faster. Harry looked over his shoulder. They were now blocked from sight, and they couldn't see Hagrid's garden at all. "Stop," he whispered to Hermione. "They might hear us." Hagrid's back door had opened with a bang. Harry and Hermione and Buckbeak stood quite still. Even the hippogriff seemed to be listening intently. Silence, then. "Where is it?" said the reedy voice of the committee member. "Where is the beast?" "It was tied here," said the executioner furiously. "I saw it, just here." "How extraordinary," said Dumbledore. There was a note of amusement in his voice. "Beaky," said Hagrid huskily. There was a swishing noise and a thud of an axe. The executioner seemed to have swung it into the fence with anger, and then came the howling, and this time they could hear Hagrid's words through his sobs. "Gone, gone. Bless his little beak, he's gone. Must have pulled himself free. Beaky, you clever boy." Buckbeak started to strain against the rope, trying to get back to Hagrid. Harry and Hermione tightened their grip on and dug their heels into the forest floor to stop him. "Someone untied him," the executioner was snarling. We should search the grounds. The forest." "McNair, if Buckbeak was indeed stolen, do you really think that the thief would have led him away on foot?" said Dumbledore, still sounding amused. Search the skies, if you will, Hagrid. I could do for a cup of tea, or a large brandy. Oh, of course, Professor, said Hagrid, who sounded weak with happiness. Come in, come in. Harry and Hermione listened closely. They heard footsteps, the soft crushing of the executioner, the snap at the door, and then silence once more. Now what? Whispered Harry, looking round. We'll have to hide in here, said Hermione, who looked very shaken. We need to wait until they come back to the castle. Then we wait until it's safe to fly Buckbeak up to Sirius's window. He won't be there for a couple of hours. Oh, this is going to be difficult. She looked nervously over her shoulder into the depths of the forest. The sun is setting now. We're going to have to move, said Harry, thinking hard. We've got to be able to see the Whomping Willow, or we won't know what's going on. Okay, said Hermione, getting a firmer grip on Buckbeak's rope. But we've got to keep out of sight, Harry. Remember, they moved round the edge of the forest, darkness falling thickly around them until they were hidden behind a clump of trees through which they could make out the willow. There's Ron, said Harry suddenly. The dark figure was sprinting across the lawn, and its shout echoed through the still night air. Get away from him! Get away! Scrabbers, come here! And then they saw two more fingers materialize out of nowhere. Harry watched himself and Hermione chasing after Ron. Then he saw Ron dive. Gotcha! Get off, you stinking cat! There's Sirius, said Harry. The great shape of the dog had bounded out from the roots of the willow. They saw him bowl Harry over, then seize Ron. Looks even worse from here, doesn't it? Said Harry, watching the dog pulling Ron into the roots. Ouch, look, I just got walloped by the tree, and so did you. This is weird. The Whomping Willow was creaking and lashing out with its lower branches. They could see themselves darting here and there, trying to reach the trunk, and then the tree froze. That was Crookshanks pressing the knot, said Hermione. There we go, Harry muttered. We're in. The moment they disappeared, the tree began to move. Seconds later, they heard footsteps quite close by. Dumbledore, McNair, Fudge, and the old committee member were making their way up to the castle. Right after we'd gone into the passage, said Hermione, if only Dumbledore had come with us. McNair and Fudge would have come too, said Harry bitterly. I bet you anything Fudge would have told McNair to murder Sirius on the spot. They watched the four men climb the steps and disappear from view. A few minutes, the scene was deserted. Then, here comes Lupin, said Harry, as they saw another figure sprinting down the stone steps and herring towards the willow. Harry looked up at the sky. Clouds were obscuring the moon completely. They watched Lupin seize the broken branch from the ground and prod the knot of the trunk. The tree stopped fighting, and Lupin, too, disappeared into the gap in its roots. If he'd only grabbed the cloak, said Harry. He's just lying there. He turned to Hermione. If I just dashed out and grabbed it, Snape would never be able to get it in. Harry, we mustn't be seen. How can you stand by this? Said Hermione fiercely. Just standing here and watching it happen. He hesitated. I'm going to grab the cloak. Harry, no. Hermione seized the back of Harry's robes, not a moment too soon. Just then they heard a burst of a song. It was Hagrid making his way up to the castle, singing at the top of his voice and weaving slightly as he walked. A large bottle was swinging from his hands. See, Hermione whispered. See what could have happened? We could have been, we have to keep out of sight. No, Buckbeak. The Hippogriff was making frantic attempts to get to Hagrid. Harry seized the rope too, straining the old Buckbeak back. They watched Hagrid meander tipsily up the castle. He was gone. Buckbeak stopped fighting to get away. His head drooped sadly. Barely 2 minutes later, the castle doors flew open yet again, and Snape came charging out at them, running towards the willow. Harry's fists clenched as they watched Snape skid to a halt next to the tree, looking round. He grabbed the cloak and held it up. Get your filthy hands off it, Harry snarled under his breath. Shh. Snape seized the branch Lupin had used to freeze the tree, prodded the knot, and vanished from view as he put on the cloak. So that's it, said Hermione quietly. We're all down there. Now it's just going to wait until we come back up again. She took the end of Buckbeak's rope and tied securely around the nearest tree, then sat on the dry ground, arms around her knees. Harry, there's something I don't understand. Why didn't the Dementors get Sirius? I remember them coming, and I think I passed out. There were so many of them. Harry sat down too. He explained what he'd seen, how, as the nearest Dementor had lowered its mouth to Harry's, the large silvery came galloping across the lake and forced the Dementors to retreat. Hermione's mouth was slightly open by the time Harry had finished, but what was it? There's only one thing that it could have been to make the Dementors go away, a real Patronus, a powerful one. But who conjured it? Harry didn't say anything. He was thinking back to the person he'd seen on the other side of the bank on the lake. He knew who he thought it had been, or who could it have been. Didn't you see what they look like? Said Hermione eagerly. Was it one of the teachers? No, said Harry. He wasn't a teacher. But it must have been really a really powerful wizard to drive all the Dementors away. If the Patronus was shining so brightly, didn't it light him up? Couldn't you see? Yeah, I saw him, said Harry slowly, but maybe I imagined it. I wasn't thinking straight. I passed out right afterwards. Who do you think it was? I think Harry swallowed, knowing how strange this was going to sound. I think it was my dad. Harry glanced up at Hermione and saw her mouth was full open now. She was gazing at him with a mixture of alarm and pity. Harry, your dad's, well, dead, she said quietly. I know that, said Harry quickly. You think you saw his ghost? I don't know. No, he looked solid, but then maybe I was seeing things, said Harry, but from what I could see, it looked like him. I've got photos of him. Hermione was still looking at him as though worried about his sanity. I know it sounds mad, said Harry finally. He turned to look at Buckbeak, who was digging his beak into the ground, apparently searching for worms, but he wasn't really watching Buckbeak. He was thinking about his father and about his three oldest friends, Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs. Had the four of them been out in the grounds tonight? Wormtail had reappeared this evening when everyone thought he was dead. Was it so possible his father had done the same? He had been seeing things across the lake. The figure had been too far away to see distinctly, and yet he felt sure for a moment before he'd lost consciousness. The leaves overhead rustled faintly in the breeze, and the moon drifted in and out of sight behind the shifting clouds. Hermione sat with her face towards the willow, waiting, and then, at last, after over an hour, "Here we come," Hermione whispered. She and Harry got to their feet. Buckbeak raised his head. They saw Lupin, Ron, and Pettigrew clambering awkwardly out of the hole in the roots, followed by the unconscious Snape, dripping weirdly upwards. Next came Harry, Hermione, and Black. They all began to walk towards the castle. Harry's heart was starting to beat very fast. He glanced up at the sky. Any moment now, the cloud was going to move aside and show the moon. Harry, Hermione muttered as though she knew exactly what he was thinking. We've got to stay put. We mustn't be seen. There's nothing we can do. So we're just going to let Pettigrew escape all over again, said Harry quietly. How do you expect to find a rat in the dark, snapped Hermione. There's nothing we can do. We came back to help Sirius. We're not supposed to be doing anything else. All right. The moon slid out from behind the cloud, and there was tiny figures across the ground stops. Then they saw movement. There goes Lupin, Hermione whispered. He's transforming. Hermione, said Harry suddenly, we've got to move. We mustn't. I keep telling you not to interfere, but Lupin's going to run into the forest right after us. Hermione gasped. Quick, she moaned, dashing to untie Buckbeak. Quick, where are we going to go? Where are we going to hide? The Dementors will be coming any moment. Back to Hagrid, said Harry. It's empty now. Come on. They ran fast as they could, Buckbeak cantering along behind them. They could hear the werewolf howling behind them. The cabin was in sight, and Harry skidded to the door, wrenched it open, and Hermione and Buckbeak flashed past him. Harry threw himself in after them and bolted the door. Fang the boarhound barked loudly. Shh, Fang, it's us, said Hermione, hurrying over to scratching his ears to quiet him. That was really close, she said to Harry. Yeah. Harry was looking out the window. It was much harder to see what was going on from here. Buckbeak seemed to be very happy to find himself back in Hagrid's house. He lay down in front of the fire, folded his wings contentedly, and seemed ready for a good nap. I think I'd better go outside again, said Harry slowly. I can't see what's going on. We won't know when it's time. Hermione looked up. Her expression was suspicious. I'm not going to try to interfere, said Harry quickly, but if we don't see what's going on, how are we going to know when it's time to rescue Sirius? Well, okay then. I'll wait here with Buckbeak, but Harry, be careful. There's a werewolf out there and the Dementors. Harry stepped outside again and edged around the cabin. He could hear yelping in the distance. That meant that the Dementors were closing in. He and Hermione would be running to him any moment. Harry stared out towards the lake, his heart doing a kind of drum roll in his chest. Whoever had sent that Patronus would be appearing at any moment. For a fraction of a second he stood, irresolute, in front of Hagrid's door. You must not be seen, but he didn't want to be seen. He wanted to do the seeing. He had to know. And there were the Dementors. They were emerging out of the darkness from every direction, gliding around the edges of the lake. They were moving away from where Harry stood to the opposite bank. He wouldn't have to get near them. Harry began to run. He had no thought in his head except his father. It was with him. If it really was him, he had to know. He had to find out. The lake was coming nearer and nearer, but there was no sign of anybody. On the opposite bank, he could see tiny glimmers of silver, his own attempts at a Patronus. There was a bush at the very edge of the water, and Harry threw himself behind it, peering desperately through the leaves. On the opposite bank, The glimmers of silver were suddenly extinguished. A terrified excitement shot through him. Any moment now. Come on, he muttered, staring about. Where are you? Dad, come on. But no one came. Harry raised his head to look at the circle of Dementors across the lake. One of them was lowering its hood. It was time for the rescuer to appear, but no one was coming to help this time. And then it hit him. He understood. He hadn't seen his father. He had seen himself. Harry flung himself out from behind the bush and pulled out his wand. Expecto Patronum, he yelled. At the end of his wand burst not a shapeless cloud of mist, but a blinding, dazzling silver animal. He screwed up his eyes, trying to see what it was. It looked like a horse. It was galloping silently away from him across the black surface of the lake. He saw it lower its head and charge at the swarming Dementors. It was now galloping round and round the black shapes on the ground, and the Dementors were falling back, scattered, retreating into the darkness. They were gone. The Patronus turned. It was cantering back towards Harry across the still surface of the water. It wasn't a horse. It wasn't a unicorn either. It was a stag. It was as shining brightly as the moon above. It was still coming back to him. It stopped on the bank, lowered its hooves, made no mark on the soft ground, and stared at Harry with its large silver eyes. Slowly it bowed its antlered head, and Harry realized. Prongs, he whispered. But as his trembling fingertips stretched towards the creature, it vanished. Harry stood there, hand still outstretched. Then, with a great leap of his heart, he heard hooves behind them. He whirled around and saw Hermione dashing toward him, driving back Buckbeak with her. What did you see? She said fiercely. You said you were only going to keep a lookout. I just saved our lives, said Harry. Get behind there, behind this bush. I'll explain. Hermione listened to what had just happened with her mouth open again. Did you see, anyone? Did they see you? Yes. Haven't you been listening? I saw me, but I thought it was my dad. It's okay. Harry, I can't believe it. You conjured up a Patronus that drove away all the Dementors. That's very, very advanced magic. I knew I could do it this time, said Harry, because I'd already done it. Does that make any sense? I don't know, Harry. Look at Snape. Together they peered around the bush at the other bank, and Snape had regained consciousness. He was conjuring stretchers and lifting the limp forms of Harry, Hermione, and Black onto them. The fourth stretcher, no doubt bearing Ron, was already floating at his side. Then, wand held out in front of him, he moved them towards the castle. Right, it's nearly time, said Hermione tensely, looking at her watch. We've got about 45 minutes until Dumbledore locks the door to the hospital wing. We've got to rescue Sirius and get back into the ward before anybody realizes we're missing. They waited, watching the moving clouds reflected in the lake, while the bush next to them whispered in the breeze. Buckbeak bored was fettering for worms again. Do you reckon he's up there yet? Said Harry, checking his watch. He looked up at the castle and then began counting the windows on the right of the west tower. Look, Hermione whispered. Who's that? Someone's coming back out of the castle. Harry stared through the darkness. The man was hurrying across the grounds towards one of the entrances, something shiny glinting in his belt. McNair, said Harry, the executioner. He's gone to get the Dementors. That's it, Hermione. Hermione put her hand on Buckbeak's back, and Harry gave her a leg up. Then he placed his foot on the other lower branches of the bush and climbed up in front of her. He pulled Buckbeak's rope back over his neck and tied it to the other side of the collar like reins. Ready, he whispered to Hermione. You better hold on to me. He nudged Buckbeak's side with his heels, and Buckbeak soared straight into the air. Harry gripped his flanks with his knees, feeling the great wings rising powerfully beneath him. Hermione was holding Harry very tightly around the waist. He could hear her muttering, Oh no, I don't like this. Oh, I really don't like this. Harry urged Buckbeak forward. They were gliding quietly towards the upper floors of the castle. Harry pulled hard on the left side of the rope, and Buckbeak turned. Harry was trying to count the windows, flashing past. Whoa, he said, pulling back as hard as he could. Buckbeak slowed down, and they found themselves in a stop, unless you counted the fact that they were still rising up, down several feet as he beat his wings to remain airborne. He's there, Harry said, spotting Sirius up as they rose beside the window. He reached back as Buckbeak's wings fell, was able to tap sharply on the glass. Black looked up. Harry saw his jaw drop. He leapt from his chair, hurried to the window, and tried to open it, but it was locked. Stand back, Hermione called him, and she took out her wand, still gripping the back of Harry's robes as with her left hand. Alorium. The window sprang open. How, said Black, weakly, staring at the hippogriff. Get on, there's not much time, said Harry, gripping Buckbeak firmly on the other side of his sleek neck to hold him steady. You've got to get out of here. The Dementors are coming. McNair's gone to get them. Buckbeak placed a hand on either side of the window frame and heaved his head and shoulders out of it. It was very lucky he was so thin. In seconds, he'd managed to fling one leg over Buckbeak's back and pull himself onto the hippogriff behind Hermione. Okay, Buckbeak, said Harry, shaking the rope. Up to the tower. Come on. The hippogriff gave one sweep of its mighty wings, and they were soaring upwards again, high as the top of the West Tower. Buckbeak landed with a clatter of the battlements on Harry and Hermione, slid off him at once. Sirius, you'd better go. Quick, Harry panted. They'll reach Flintwood's office any moment, and they'll find that you've gone. Buckbeak pawed the ground, tossing his sharp head. What happened to the other boy? Ron, said Sirius urgently. He's going to be okay. He's out of it, but Madame Pomfrey says that he'll be able to make him better quick. Go. But Black was still staring down at Harry. How can I ever thank you? Go! Harry and Hermione shouted together. Black wheeled Buckbeak around, facing the open sky. We'll see each other again, he said. You are truly your father's son, Harry. He squeezed Buckbeak's side with his heels, and Harry and Hermione jumped back. As the enormous wings rose once more, the hippogriff took off into the air. He and his rider became smaller and smaller as Harry gazed after them. Then a cloud drifted across the moon. They were gone. Chapter 22, Owl Post Again. Harry, Hermione was tugging at his sleeve, staring at her watch. We've got exactly 10 minutes to get back down to the hospital wing without anybody seeing us, before Dumbledore locks the door. Okay, said Harry, wrenching his gaze from the sky. Let's go. They slipped through the doorway behind them and down a tightly spiraling stone staircase. As they reached the bottom of it, they heard voices. They flattened themselves against the wall and listened. It sounded like Fudge and Snape, and they were walking quickly along the corridor at the foot of the staircase. Only hope Dumbledore's not going to make difficulty, Snape was saying. The kiss will be performed immediately. As soon as McNair returns with the Dementors, this whole black affair has been highly embarrassing. I can't tell you how much I'm looking forward to informing the Daily Prophet that we've got him at last. I dare say that they'll want to interview you, Snape, and once young Harry's back in the right mind, I'll expect he'll want to tell the Prophet exactly how you saved him. Harry clenched his teeth. He caught a glimpse of Snape's smirk, and he and Fudge passed Harry and Hermione's hiding place. Their footsteps died away. Harry and Hermione waited a few moments to make sure that they were really gone. Then they started to run the opposite direction, down one staircase and another, along a new corridor. Then they heard a cackling ahead. Peeves, Harry muttered, grabbing Hermione's wrist. In there, they tore into a deserted classroom to the left just in time. Peeves seemed to be bouncing along the corridor in tearing spirits, laughing his head off. Oh, he's horrible, whispered Hermione, her ear to the door. I bet he's all excited because the Dementors are going to finish Sirius. She checked her watch. 3 minutes, Harry. They waited until Peeves' gloating voice had faded into the distance, then slid back out of the room and broke into a run again. Hermione, what'll happen if we don't get inside before Dumbledore locks the door? Harry panted. I don't want to think about it, Hermione moaned, checking her watch again. 1 minute. They reached the end of the corridor with the hospital wing entrance. Okay, I can hear Dumbledore, said Hermione tensely. Come on, Harry. They crept along the corridor. The door seemed open, and Dumbledore's back appeared. I'm going to lock you in, they heard him say. It was 5 minutes to midnight. Miss Granger, 3 turns should do it. Good luck. Dumbledore backed out of the room, closed the door, and took out his wand to magically lock it. Panicking, Harry and Hermione ran forwards, and Dumbledore looked up with a wide smile, appearing under his long silver mustache. Well, he said, we did it, said Harry breathlessly. Sirius is gone, on Buckbeak. Dumbledore beamed at them. Well done, I think. He listened intently for any sound within the hospital wing. Yes, I think that you've gone to. Get inside. I'll lock you in. Harry and Hermione slipped back inside the dormitory. It was empty except for Ron, who was still lying motionless in the end of his bed. As the lock clicked behind them, Harry and Hermione crept back into their own beds, Hermione tucking the time turner back under her robes. Next moment, Madame Pomfrey had come striding back from out of her office. Did I hear the headmaster leaving? Am I allowed to look after my patients now? She was in a very bad mood. Harry and Hermione thought it best to accept their chocolate quietly. Madame Pomfrey stood over them, making sure that they ate it, but Harry could hardly swallow. He and Hermione were waiting, listening, their nerves jingling. And then, as they both took the 4th piece of chocolate from Madame Pomfrey, they heard a distant roar, a fury echoing somewhere above them. What was that? Said Madame Pomfrey in alarm. Now they could hear angry voices growing louder and louder. Madame Pomfrey was staring at the door. Really, they'll wake everybody up. What do they think that they're doing? Harry was trying to hear what the voices were saying. They were drawing near. He must have disappointed Severus. We should have left somebody in the room with them. When this gets out, He didn't disappartate, Snape roared, now very close at hand. You can't apartate or disappartate inside this castle. This has something to do with Potter. Severus, be reasonable. Harry has been locked up. Bam! The door to the hospital wing burst open. Fudge, Snape, and Dumbledore came striding into the ward. Dumbledore alone looked calm. Indeed, he looked as though he was quite enjoying himself. Fudge appeared angry, but Snape was beside himself. Out with it, Potter, he bellowed. What did you do? Professor Snape, shrieked Madame Pomfrey. Control yourself. I think that's about all that we're going to do today, because we're going to go in 30 minutes. But we're about done. It looks like we only have under 20 pages, so we'll finish this up tomorrow. I love you guys. I miss you. I hope that you're doing well, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.